We had a reason to show up every day and get paid, but at the same time, in the back of my mind, I kept thinking, if I keep taking this easy money every day, maybe it's going to hurt me in the long run. Maybe the customers who are starting to call now asking, how's the fishing? How are y'all doing? Maybe I need to try to put my energy into getting those people back on the water and maybe do so sooner than the competition, and hopefully it pays dividends. And that's what I did. I gave up, the easy money, as did Captain Billy, and we both started fishing basically every day 4 months into the BP program that we were on. And the customers just kept coming, and they never stopped, and all the other guys worked, a little bit longer. Some stopped in 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, but ultimately they all came back, and we had the business we needed to sustain ourselves and keep on going.
This is the Tom Rowland Podcast. Fascinating stories to amaze, encourage, and inspire you in fishing, fitness, and the outdoors. And we're brought to you by Black Rifle Coffee. I started this podcast as a way to connect with my friends, people that I admire and respect, and you. It has been a learning journey that's made me a better person, a better fisherman, a better father, and a better athlete. I'm so happy that you're on this journey with me, and I'd love to hear from you with show suggestions, guest suggestions, or questions. The best way to get a hold of me is through text. You can text 305-930-7346 for the fastest response, but if you prefer to email, you can send that to podcast@saltwaterexperience.com. That's a dedicated email address just for the show. If you like this show, you can show your support by posting about it on social media and tagging me. Text the link to a couple of friends that may also enjoy it, and subscribe and leave a 5-star review if you feel like I've earned it. The website is tomrowlandpodcast.com, and that is where everything lives. All past shows, you can go and listen to any show. You can look up all the different shows that we've done, both the How To Tuesdays, the full links, and the Physical Fridays. They all live on tomrowlandpodcast.com. And the social media is Tom_Rowland, ROWLAND, on Instagram, or you can go to our big account, Saltwater_Experience. I hope to hear from you soon. So now, let's get on to today's show.
I'm Anthony Randazzo, and this is the Tom Rowland Podcast.
Right. Anthony, what's going on, my man?
Not much. Living the dream.
I know. We lived the dream today.
That's right.
Here we are at Paradise Plus. We got your beautiful lodge behind us. We're sitting in Buras, Louisiana. Just had an awesome day with my daughter, which makes it a slam, right? You fished with me and Hayden. You fished with me and Turner. You fished with me and Hannah now.
That's right.
You fished with me and Rich.
That's right. All 4 kids.
Fish with me, yeah, all 4 of my kids. You fished with me and Rich more than Hannah and Hayden and Turner. But man, what a special place this is. This is Venice, Louisiana, Buras, Louisiana. This place is just amazing.
We love it. Glad you could be here as much as you are.
I know. Well, it's not as much as it used to be.
True.
So to bring people up to speed, we used to fish the tournaments together.
Exactly.
And travel all over the place.
Yeah.
And that was back in around 2005, 2004, 2003 maybe.
We met in 2003, I believe, in Titusville, Florida. And from there on, we traveled around for a few years and had great experiences in all different venues across the Gulf Coast.
That's right. Well, I probably learned more about redfish and red fishing from you than anybody else. You know more about redfish probably than anybody that I've ever fished with, and that's because you're right here. Like, why wouldn't you? You're in the Mecca. This is the redfish Mecca. Wouldn't you say?
Thanks for the compliment. Yes, the redfish do a lot of the hard work. I do the easy work. They make me look good.
Yeah, well, they're there, but you have to find them. And what's crazy about finding them here is that you have so many different factors that we don't necessarily have in the Florida Keys or anywhere else in Florida, or really even in Texas when we fished over there. This is just a different area. What threw me for a loop was the salinity, where how you're able to not only judge like what tomorrow's going to be by the weather,
but also by how, I remember I'd find some fish, tournament winning fish, 100%. I tell you about them, you're like, well, they're not going to be there tomorrow. How do you know? Because that pond's going to be too low, or that pond's going to be too high, or the fresh water is going to move in. Now, I could kind of get to the point to where I could feel like, okay, I understand where the water level is going to be based upon the predicted tides, the wind, the barometric pressure maybe even.
Yeah.
But the salinity, I could never really get my arms around that like you did. How do you predict the salinity?
Well, it's not a perfect science. It's an educated guess at best. But we just learned from doing it over and over and over. We've had the luxury of fishing for 30 years here, and we watched the seasonal patterns come and go. We watched the, differences in the river levels, and not every year is the same. A long time ago, it was relatively consistent where you had a high river in the spring and a low river late summer and a low river in the fall. And then all of a sudden, things started deviating where we'd have high river in January and again in March and again in July, and we couldn't, wrap our heads around it. But we do know there's certain things that are going to happen when we have a really high river. Mm-hmm. The fish are going to move further away from the river. They're going to find those tiny little spots that have just the bare minimum of salinity, and in turn they're going to have the bare minimum of food. Mm-hmm. And those fish are going to go there because it's kind of like do or die, and they want to be shallow. They don't necessarily want to be in the Gulf. They're going to pursue the conditions that suit their needs. So that's what we do. We study their needs, and mm-hmm. we try to figure out what they're thinking and go at it from that approach. But it's not always perfect. There's times we go out there and we don't catch fish for 6 hours and we're beating on our heads trying to figure out what's going on. How can we change things to make it work to our advantage?
Mm-hmm. Now, when we were fishing the tournaments, it's kind of a funny rule set for some people. Like some people never could get their head around, why aren't you just going for the one biggest fish, or why are you going for this? And there was a slot limit of 18 to 27 inches. So we were looking for the biggest, fattest, heaviest 27-inch fish that you could possibly find. Now that fish is going to be much heavier here in Louisiana than it's going to be in Florida and, as we found, in Texas. These are the biggest, heaviest, fattest fish going. Now, as it comes to finding those big, heavy slot fish, that was something that you were also good at, about knowing where a certain size fish was going to be and knowing, okay, well, those are all going to be small fish over there, or mm-hmm. if we go out there, they are all going to be too big.
Sure.
So how did you do that? Is that and I did it too, but we did it kind of together, but we're following your lead in Louisiana for sure.
Sure.
So what's the idea there? Like, how can you figure out where that fish is consistently?
A couple of variables come into play when we're looking for those tournament size fish. It's a lot of strategy, but for one, if you go and you fish an area or multiple areas and you're catching all 25-inch fish and occasionally a 27-inch fish, you're probably not going to find that real heavy fish. Mm-hmm. But if you're fishing areas that you're catching all 29, 30-inch fish and occasionally a 27-inch fish, that 27-inch fish is likely going to be heavier than the 27-inch fish schooled up with the smaller class. So we tried to figure out the classes of fish and what they were doing. And, sometimes it really just boiled down to the annual spawns of the redfish here. If we knew, there was going to be a big push of fish coming in March, then we're going to go look and spots close to where those bigger fish are supposed to be.
Right.
And same thing in August. There's just a lot of big fish here in August, so we're going to try to fish close to them. But then there's times where you just got to go find some place that's secluded, that's got all the right ingredients, good marsh grass and a variety of food. But the one food that seemed to put the most weight on the fish every time was the menhaden. Mm-hmm. So if we knew where menhaden were, we'd always try to fish near them. And they generally come in here pretty heavy in September and October. So you automatically stop figuring, I'm going to go fish some ponds with some crabs and maybe a few mullet and snails. I'm going to go fish menhaden waters, mostly, pockets of saltwater close to the coast where those menhaden are moving in, mm-hmm. and try to find those fish that are just gorging themselves with these menhaden, because that's like pure protein,
Right.
puts the weight on instantly.
And they're going to stay with those menhaden for
They
the
do.
most part.
Yes.
But the menhaden, just like everything else, it throws all the difficulty into it. When the salinity changes, when the wind changes, when the water levels change, they move too.
Sure
and
enough.
then the redfish follow them. But
Oh, yeah.
you got every kind of habitat that a redfish lives in, I think, right out here. And that's what I think makes you and so many of the Louisiana guys, when we were fishing those tournaments, the Louisiana guys were right up there, and the only place that maybe anybody struggled would maybe be Florida. But you did well in all of the states.
Well, certainly with little help from guys like you saying, you need to focus on this more so than that. And,
Yeah.
I spent a lot of days in 05 fishing in Rich's boat and just, watching him figure out where we needed to be and what we needed to be throwing, opened up my eyes and I learned so much, that I wouldn't have learned otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's definitely different. It's very different. The fishing that we do in the Florida Keys, Flamingo, Everglades is definitely very different than up here. Mostly, these fish eat really, really, really well.
Well,
they do.
They need to eat to grow, and I guess it's just part of it. There's a lot of fish, and they're all competing for food, so they do eat. But we do have the luxury of having not so clear water. Mm-hmm. Some anglers really like the clear water and want to see the fish and cast to the fish, which is great. I love to do it too, but it's a seasonal event here. Whereas more often than not, we've got stained to muddy water, and the fish are in it. You just have to fish them, and they'll cooperate.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you get back in the ponds and stuff, you can see water clear enough to see the fish and sight fish, and some of it, depending on the weather and the wind and how much it settles out, you can see pretty clearly. But you can certainly see good enough to see the fish,
right.
And you're doing that too. I mean, you're doing all of this different types of fishing.
Sure.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite, is being able to see them like that, because the way that these fish eat here is, they attack it. It's pretty awesome. So when did you get this lodge? And bring me up to speed. Like, I know your background is bass fishing. You wanted to be a competitive bass fisherman. You
Sure.
ended up being an incredibly successful competitive red fisherman. But how did it start for you? How did you end up as a professional guide and lodge owner?
Well, being young and naive and not knowing how the wide world of professional bass fishing worked, I just found myself drawn towards the saltwater guiding aspect because I knew I'd get a paycheck on a regular basis. Whereas it seemed as if I were a full-time bass pro, I would be paying entry fees and hopefully winning tournament purses and living off of that. I didn't understand the marketing side of the business back then, and I thought, that's a big gamble. Why gamble when I could just go fishing, do what I know how to do, and people are going to pay me, and at the end of the day, I don't have any stress. I'll just, go on about my business and try to book more charters. So that kind of led me into that. And then,
How old were you then?
Well, I started guiding when I was 21.
Okay.
So, I had already competitively bass fished prior to 21, did pretty good at it, and continued to do it in my early 20s, but I was incorporating more and more of my time into saltwater guiding.
And mostly in this area, or were you?
Yes, every bit of water from New Orleans to Venice.
So where'd you grow up?
Right outside of New Orleans.
In Belle Chase?
Marrero is the town, yeah.
So when you move back now, you're back in Marrero. You're back at home.
Yeah, a couple minutes from the same house I grew up in.
Really? Right. That's good, man. That's good. So how does the lodge? When does the lodge become a part of it?
After about 10 years of guiding, I knew I needed to do something just a little bit different to generate more income and hopefully, grow the business. And I looked around for a few years. There were very few properties available down here that fit the bill, and I actually stumbled across this one purely by chance, and it has evolved into exactly what we dreamed of back then.
Yeah. Well, it's gotten bigger now. When we first came here, I don't think you didn't have cabins back here, right?
None whatsoever.
And now you've got, 1, 2, 3, 4 cabins plus the lodge. How many people can stay here?
30 anglers
30
at a time.
anglers can stay here?
Sure.
Really? And so how many in the main lodge?
20.
20 in the main lodge plus another 10 out here. That's awesome. And then you've got, it's really what you can't see behind us here is another enclosed or not enclosed, but covered area for fish cleaning for all this. This is, I don't know, every time I come here, it just brings back so many memories of those 2003, 4, 5 years of, I don't know, this is so much more fun, honestly, to come here and just fish.
No doubt.
Rather than come here and try to compete against the best of the best in an area that you don't know. That was rough. That was really
it's rough on all of us. I'm in a better place now because I just have to wake up and take people fishing every day. And granted, a customer's expectations are different than a tournament angler's expectations, but in general, I feel like I can accomplish a customer's expectations 99% of the time, whereas I might not accomplish my own tournament expectations half of the time.
Right. Well, your tournament expectations are to win, and in certain ways, like what we were doing then, when I look back on it, when people ask me about the tournament, I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't even know why we did it. It was a terrible financial plan to leave paying trips in the Florida Keys to come up here or to go to Texas in the middle of tarpon season and try to win an amount of money that you would split with somebody else, then put in your travel expenses, then all the entry fees, then everything else. And it was just a really bad idea.
It was a awkward accounting rationale. But for me, even though I wasn't here guiding, I still had guides working.
Right.
So I still had customers staying in the lodge. So I was making enough money to live on. I didn't have to win when I fished in a tournament to pay my bills. So that took a level of stress off right there. And we had decent sponsors at the time, and that helped quite a bit
for
as
sure.
well, drop the stress down, where you met guys on the tour who were living in their trucks and eating potted meat and just trying to do everything they could do to get to the next event and hopefully get a big check.
Yeah. I tell you what was when I look back on that, in some ways I look back on it and I'm like, whoo, that was rough. And in other ways I look back on it and I'm like, man, that was when the adrenaline was at the highest, when you're going to these areas and you're competing with the best. Literally, you're competing with the best of the best. And we had, at the time, it started out with the IFA, and then there was the ESPN Redfish Cup, and so it's now getting major airtime, and it looked like this is going to really be the next big thing, and lots of people saw that.
Sure. And
it brought anglers from Texas and Louisiana and Florida and everywhere coming into these tournaments, and man, it was a very, very, very competitive field.
It was. There was talent beyond our wildest imagination, and we were in the middle of the field for all practical comparisons. We could fish well here, but we didn't have a fighting chance out of state for a couple of years. We had to go and really compound our knowledge day after day. I mean, when I went to Florida the first time, I didn't even have the knowledge to tie a leader to my line because I had never used a leader here. I had to learn how to tie a leader on to be competitive.
We had to learn how not to see a fish and catch it when you don't see one.
Exactly.
We're like, you can do that? You can just throw out there and just catch something? And then it turns out that was a very effective way to fish. Like, you're fishing blind, but we were so used to just seeing everything. And then, but when I look at that, it's like those are the times where I learned the most. And that was where you had the most to learn of. If all you do is sight fish, you're a one-dimensional fisherman, and if you don't know how to look at an area and break it into little pieces and say, well, these are where I think the fish are, even though I can't see them there. I visualize them sitting on this little edge right here, sitting on this little point, or doing whatever, and then going over there and then trying to catch them. And when you do get that bite, it's like, oh, okay, my plan worked, right?
Sure.
And then but they're this big or they're this big, and that's not good. You're looking for a perfect size.
One of our biggest advantages was, in the early years of the tournament scene, is the guys that would come here from out of state, they'd all bring small boats and they'd all go to the skinniest water they could find, and they'd pole around looking for fish. And we're out in the deeper water blind casting, catching a ton of fish and having our way with the fish, basically. So we had a gigantic advantage over someone who came in from out of state.
But those guys, some of them would see the right fish and catch the right fish.
They would.
And they were really good at that, and then the ladders came into the play, and then everybody's getting up high and everybody's seeing stuff, and wow, it was such a wild time. What's the scene now? I mean, I'm really not into the redfish scene anymore. What is the tournament scene these days?
Obviously, there's a few tournament circuits that are in existence today. I don't fish any of them anymore, but they're out there. And if someone wanted to get into a one-day weekend tournament, they've got stuff there for those guys. There's a multi-day tournaments. There's individual tournaments, team tournaments, tournaments where they're weighing fish on Facebook Live and not even bringing them to the scales.
Really?
Yeah. So
I guess the internet changes everything like that.
Without a doubt. I kind of like those concepts, though, where there's no measure. And I saw one tournament had a format where if it was 8 pounds 0 ounces on the scale or above, it was disqualified. Everything else underneath was a qualifying fish.
Really?
So you don't have to worry about whether or not your fish is too big or too small, touching the line or not touching the line. It's kind of a unique idea where you take that element out of it. You don't even need a fish measure / weigh master on shore because it's all happening out on the boat.
Right. That's interesting. That's one of the benefits of the internet and social media and all that. There's certainly downsides to it as well. We're sitting here right by this fire. This is the way that I envisioned the podcast to always go. I always thought that this was like a fireside chat. Like you just sit, like how many times do you sit out here with your clients or you hang out by the fire and you're just having some of the best conversations about whatever.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's about fishing.
Sometimes, but you never know what the topic's going to be, and you never know what you're going to learn. We meet a very diverse group of people here, and so many are interesting in ways that I can't even describe.
So about that, somehow I'm losing my voice. I don't know why I'm doing that, but it's going away. So if I sound like I'm going through puberty, it's really not that. It's
coming in pretty clear on mine.
Yeah, but it does crack a little bit. I don't know. So as far as learning, like, what do you think? You've had so much ups and downs here with this. I mean, right where we're sitting at one point, we came here right after Hurricane Katrina, and this area got hit really hard. And your lodge was underwater, right?
Yeah.
So what was that like when you were? I mean, the people in Louisiana and certainly yourself, you're very resilient people here. You have to be because of the hurricanes. Same with us in Florida. But go through that just a little bit of kind of just what that was like, man. Just to have that happen. Like it's
a
right here
heart-wrenching
behind
experience.
us. There's the levee, right? And the levee's what, 30 feet tall or
17 feet above
17?
sea level. You're looking at some sheet piling on top of the earthen levee.
Okay.
That's kind of there for reinforcement because there's a huge bend in the river right here. Most people don't even think of the Mississippi River as a deep river, but this is the second tightest bend in the river, next to the bend in downtown New Orleans. There's right behind that wall, it's 185 feet deep.
185 feet deep.
Right. So they put that there for reinforcement just to kind of keep everything nice and tight and in check here. But in downtown New Orleans, it's 220 feet deep.
Mm-hmm. For like one just big hole or for an extended period of time?
Not very far, just one curve in the river.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how water runs the outside of the curve and digs it out? Well, that's basically what happens. Here it's a left-hand curve right behind the lodge, and it's just incredibly deep right there.
Wow. Wonder what lives in there.
Big catfish.
So, there's I've seen that in the Tennessee River where there's some 100-foot holes. I've never seen anything deeper than that, but the same kind of thing happens on the Tennessee River. But the Mississippi River is just such an incredible thing. Like it drains the country and then it pours out into the Gulf of Mexico right here, and that's why the fishing's so incredible.
Absolutely, that river just catalyzes a whole growth of nutrient-based forage for the fish to gorge themselves on and grow, prolifically. All species. I mean, the mullet is one of the biggest items of forage here, and everything eats mullet, from speckled trout, flounder, all the way up to bluefin tuna out in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah. So let's go back to the Katrina situation.
Sure.
So when Katrina hit, you got out, right?
Yeah, we did. We were in Lake Charles actually fishing a redfish tournament there. So we came home the day after the tournament, boarded up, and went back to Lake Charles and then rode it out right there, and then ultimately went to Texas and stayed with some very generous competitors on the Redfish Cup who had places to offer.
Yeah. And then how long after the storm was it till you could come back and check it out?
Well, I was fortunate. One of my good friends that worked at ESPN called me up and scheduled a helicopter flight from Houma Airport, which is 50 miles west of here, to fly over 13 days after Katrina. So I got a good look at it, but there was, actually a high spot on the highway where we could land the helicopter and get out. Couldn't really come inside the lodge, but at least, we were able to get pretty close. And a week later, I could get here in my truck.
And then we came not that much later to film a show.
Correct.
Right. And, but this was under 30 feet of water for 30 days. I think I remember you saying.
At the highest point, yeah, they had some spots that had 30 feet of water,
Right.
to the lights on some of the street poles.
Dang. That was a heck of a storm. But when we came in, it seemed like absolute total devastation on land. But then as soon as we got on the water, it was like, I mean, I don't even know how to explain it. That I've never seen so many fish. The Mississippi River was literally full. I remember you looked at the Lawrence depth finder. You're like, look, how deep do you think it is? I was like, I don't know, 20 feet. Nope, it's 30 feet and 10 feet of fish.
That's right.
Solid.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yeah. They were just piled in. It was the right season for them to be in, and the storm had brought in all that fresh salt water. I shouldn't say fresh salt water. New salt water.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of bait and lots of game fish. All had reason to take part in the party, and it was a party for quite a while.
Yeah, on the water.
Yes,
not on land.
No. It was devastating on land, but it's like any other situation. If you get hit real hard, you either got two choices. You lay down or you get up and go harder than ever, and that's what we did.
And then, how long was it before you were kind of back up and running and people were coming back?
Well, the storm was late August of 2005, and we had some temporary structures that we brought in here and powered those up in March of 2006. And we were pretty much running wide open from March on through, I think it was August of 2006 when this building was renovated behind us, and that was the anniversary of the storm, basically. So 1 year it took to get this building back up and running, but thankfully the buildings that I was able to lease were sufficient enough to house customers and cook for them and go through the daily operations.
Man, that's awesome. Then you went through the BP thing.
That's right. Another kicking the
teeth.
Privates.
Yeah. And so walk me through that. Like, I know that you were kind of out of commission working for the BP, I guess. Is that who you were working for?
Right. At first, no one knows what's going to transpire in terms of the business at hand or the business of working for BP or any of those sorts of things. So we tried to entertain the customers who had reservations, but more customers were canceling than were booking, and the reservations that were on the books were getting fewer and fewer. And it was pretty clear that about 6 weeks after the storm, we were going to be out of business if we didn't do anything. And I knew several guides who had already gone to work for BP, and I started inquiring about it and talking to the guy that was running the program, and it was like, hey, this seems like a really good deal. So we basically had a meeting. I told all the guides they all needed to go sign up and go work for BP, and we all did. And I probably did that for about 4 months, and it was not the most fulfilling job in the world, but it paid extremely well. Right. So the customers just kept coming, and they never stopped, and all the other guides worked, a little bit longer. Some stopped in 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, but ultimately they all came back, and we had the business we needed to sustain ourselves and keep on going.
Nice. And then, now you're rip roaring, right?
It's unbelievable. I sit back all the time and I keep thinking, we've reached our peak, and then lo and behold, the next year we've exceeded that, and then another year we exceeded. Coronavirus actually slowed us down. The year prior to it, we had our best year ever. Got through Corona, and we had a super solid fourth quarter in 2020 following Corona. People wanted to go fishing. It seemed like the only thing they could do. They couldn't travel to other countries and fish or hunt. They couldn't do indoor activities for the most part, but here they could get out on a boat and go fishing. So we reaped the benefits of that. We had a stellar fourth quarter, and then we had an unbelievable 2021. Best year ever. So, we're just kind of sitting here in disbelief, like, why are we so lucky? We get to take people fishing, and then they just keep coming. They want to go fishing, and we're going to keep taking them fishing.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a couple of factors. First of all, you are really good at hospitality. You take good care of your customers, but then you can take as good a care as your customers as you want and be the best in the world at it if the fishery won't sustain it, that their interest. And
such is true.
This fishery here it's really amazing. And a lot of times, I've fished offshore here a bunch of times. I've fished inshore here with you a bunch of times. And it's just an incredible, there's just so much life, and it's all because of the Mississippi River and what happens. But in your opinion, like, what is it? Is it just that all the nutrients coming in and that creates this fish factory, or like what is it that makes this area have so much offshore life, inshore life, bird life, wildlife? It's just an incredible. I mean, it's like it's literally like electric with life. Like you can just look at the dock and there's just mullet everywhere, and there's bass, and there's everything. Everywhere you look, there's like life.
Well, the river and its nutrients are a big part of it, but we've got an incredible amount of structure here, inshore and offshore. Granted, the inshore structure sometimes dwindles from wind and wave erosion, but we have coastal restoration projects that are building the marsh back and trying to make it, somewhat what it used to be, and those are a big plus. Offshore, there's a lot of oil and gas wells they've decommissioned, and they finally started to basically make reefs out of these decommissioned rigs instead of tearing them out. So you've got extra structure under the water. Some of them are cut off. Some of them are actually laid down. And these things hold a lot of fish. And then above and beyond that, you've got amount of undeveloped coastline here. I always remember we fished a tournament out of Orange Beach, Alabama, and I ran east to Panama City. And there's two bays there, West Bay and East Bay. And I couldn't catch any fish in East Bay. It had condos all the way around it. West Bay had trees all the way around it. I could catch fish in West Bay. And I really think that has a lot to do with it. Human intervention seems to thwart the proliferation of fish. There's obviously no jet skis here. We don't have a recreational area on this long peninsula from New Orleans to Venice. You don't see jet skis. You don't see water skis. And all these things, I think, help us in a unique way to allow the fish to just thrive.
Yeah. Well, one thing that allows fish to thrive in other areas is that there is like this incredible catch and release thing going on. And sometimes you can go to certain marinas and you almost see no fish coming in. And if you go to Venice Marina or Cypress Cove, every day there is a record amount of fish coming in every single day, and it doesn't seem to do anything to the fishery. I mean,
right.
It doesn't seem to have any effect whatsoever. You would think that if you just keep taking limit after limit after limit after limit, but I mean that's what the limits are there for, and there's science based on the limit of redfish and the limit of trout and the limit of tuna and the limit of wahoo and the limit of mahi and everything that you're seeing coming across that dock. But it's a lot of fish.
It is. Just the other day, Tuesday this week, we probably cleaned 200 fish right here at the table. Mostly redfish, flounder, sheep's head. And I scratch my head sometimes and say, I never would have dreamed 20 years ago we'd still be catching this many fish at this rate.
Mm-hmm. Does anybody think about that? Like as far as the catch and release, do you see any sort of a move towards maybe we don't need to catch a limit every single day?
There's been talk about reducing our speckled trout limit for a couple of years, and probably 2020 there was, or maybe 2019 there was, a label put on speckled trout as being elusive, and then last year thousands and thousands of trout were caught here. So then you got to wonder, is it a cycle, or is everything okay?
Right. How do you know?
No one knows. I mean, we can't dive in the water and see all the fish out there. They do samples, but I think the samples are skewed. I don't think they have the technology to truly sample a population like that in an area as diverse as this. Even if they gave me the tools, I don't know if I could go out there and sample effectively,
Yeah.
I think maybe they sample the same territory over and over instead of asking where they might want to look. But at the same time, the numbers are clear when you see constant social media posts by a smorgasbord of guides all up and down this highway catching fish, and east and west of this parish as well. There's just a lot of trout that were caught in 2021.
Mm-hmm. Do a lot of people come down and, I always think of Louisiana primarily as redfish, but you have anglers that come here just for trout.
We do. Apparently, there's pretty good trout fishery all along the Gulf Coast.
Mm-hmm.
Texas and Florida stand out as the two places where I have customers come and tell me, yeah, we catch our share of trout. We might not want to target trout when we're in Louisiana. We want to go and catch those redfish that we can't catch elsewhere. And another thing that our customer base seems to really request is the bigger redfish, the bull redfish, because we have such large numbers of bull redfish seasonally throughout the year that they just don't see anywhere else.
Right. What is the season for the big ones? If somebody wanted to come catch the big ones, what seasons do you recommend?
Well, I tell everyone they spawn in April and September, give or take a couple of weeks.
Twice a year.
So before the spawns in March and in August, these fish are grouping up, feeding heavily, and getting ready to go spawn. They're basically, ingesting the food they need to have the energy to do what they do when they're offshore spawning. Mm-hmm. And then you've got another cycle where after they complete that September spawn, they're going to come back inshore or close to shore and feed heavily to get through winter, when there might not be quite as much food available for them. Mm-hmm. So we've got 3 times of the year that are very predictable: March, August, and November. Give or take a couple weeks on each of those, that we know we're going to catch a lot of big fish if that's what someone wants to catch.
Now, out of those 3 months, is August going to be the calmest month?
Depends on the hurricanes.
Right. But outside of tropical weather, then I think of it, March, you're going to get cold fronts, and when you get cold fronts, we had one today, and all of a sudden it was absolutely flat calm this morning. We see a front line come through, and it's blowing 20, right, 25 even, and then March is going to be a time where you're going to consistently still have some cold fronts coming through. In August, there aren't going to be any cold fronts, but you could possibly have tropical weather, right. And then in November, you're going to start to have cold fronts again. So if I were to, and I don't know, and that's why I'm asking you this, but if I were to say, okay, is the most consistent time August because of that reason? Because right. I know what I've done with you in the past and my own experiences, you're getting on that kind of outside edge to catch those big bulls, yes. Right? And you have to have the right weather to do that.
Right. It's usually hot and flat in August. So you have the option to move around. You might have a couple thunderstorms to contend with, but in general, it's hot and it's flat. So you can go where you want to go and fish where the fish want to be. Whereas in March, you got March winds. The old adage, March winds bring April showers, April showers bring May flowers. Well, March is a windy month more often than not. So you got to work around that a bit. And November, you get some fronts, but you also get some beautiful days.
Yeah.
And on those beautiful days, it's epic. you just, can't forecast those days. You got to be here.
Yeah.
I tell everyone, don't book one day. Give yourself the benefit of at least 2 or 3 days, because one of those days is going to be right, and you want to be here when it's right.
Yeah.
You don't want to miss it.
I remember seeing a lot of your posts is you seem to really like October as well for just outstanding fishing.
It is outstanding fishing, and it's a super popular month. It's always filled to occupancy, 100%. I think there's a lot of people who avoid that summer heat. They're comfortable in October. There's very few storms, tropical storms that happen in October. Usually if we get to October 1st, the storms just kind of dwindle away, and it's hunting season. So everybody's trying to fight for those October dates. Usually someone fishes with us in October, they book the next October before they leave here.
So what's the month that is kind of the outlier that not a lot of people come and the fishing's really good?
March is one of them. It's incredibly good. You got keeper sized fish, you've got bull reds, and you've got some trout that are going to bite in March before the river starts to come up. The salinities are high. And then you've got August, where everything is just kind of hot and flat. You've got some trout still biting on the outside before they start to transition into the marsh for the fall. And then December is phenomenal. I mean, most people don't even think about December, but we have some of the best fish in the year in December every year. There's just a lot of fish to catch in a lot of places. We've got tons of options to utilize, and you get some nice weather days. You might get some cold days mixed in, but in general here in Southeast Louisiana, winter doesn't start until sometime in January.
Yeah.
And the coldest part of it's the latter January and early February.
So those are the months where you can still get time and have a reasonable chance of having a really, really good
Without
trip.
a doubt.
But you could also, I mean, you take the good with the bad. There is the possibility you can get a cold front's blowing 35.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
All day, every day.
It can happen.
That stinks.
But we generally don't go out and fish in 35-mile-per-hour winds.
I know. What is the cutoff for you? What do you think? I mean, you have so much to hide behind. You know this area so well, but at some point you're kind of like, what's the worst condition?
About 30 miles per hour is where you kind of say, is it worth it? If you don't have a large concentration of fish that you can get to safely and fish under those conditions, then you have to really start thinking about whether you want to go out. But we're lucky here. I mean, in a whole calendar year, there's probably only 5 days of the year, excluding tropical weather, that we don't fish.
Due to weather?
Yes.
Really? So if you were to look at the forecast coming up, what would be the condition that you would just be like, oh no? Not, I mean, outside of a tropical a hurricane coming is where you're going to say, oh no. But what would you? Is there one where you struggle? I mean, after all this time and all the experience you have, is there a condition that you just really boy, that just is your Achilles heel?
It's the brutal cold.
Really?
Oh yeah. I mean, it can bunch the fish up where you could literally pull into a spot and cast in a 10 by 10 square all day long and catch all the fish you could possibly imagine. But it's the physical aspect of enduring the cold and, the safety factor. I've had some groups here in February before where it was so cold, there was sleet, bridges in New Orleans were shut down, guides couldn't get here. The guides who were here were able to go and fish, and the ones that couldn't get here. But you're out there, your eyes on your rods are icing up.
Yeah.
The old Teleflex steering we used to use is icing up. The power poles are icing up. And you wonder, is it really worth it at that point?
All you got to do is outlast your clients, though.
That's true.
You got to just wait until they're like, Cap, but we got to go home.
Right.
There's freezing.
There was some days in those conditions where lots of redfish were caught.
Yeah.
That there's some days that very few were caught, or the customers just got out there and said, it's not worth it. I'm ready to go back.
Do you remember the first time you said when we met in Titusville? Do you remember that tournament?
It was cold.
Well, we were coming up from the Keys. I had never experienced fishing for saltwater fish in those conditions, and there was ice on the boat, and they were trying to put the logos on the boat when we were.
Yeah.
That was the first tournament, and the boats weren't ready, and they were trying to wrap the boats, and they were trying to put the logos on, and they wouldn't stick because it was too cold, and there was ice on the boat, and I just remember thinking, we're not going to catch anything, because I mean, in the Keys, when you have it's 70, it gets to 60. The fish are like, ooh, this is terrible.
Right.
I don't like this. Or it's 80 and it goes to 60.
Yes.
That's even worse. Like, the bigger the drop, the worse, for the water conditions. And so I'm thinking, man, what are we even doing? Like, we're not even going to, and we did great in that tournament. We got second place, I think. And it was like, it was such a surprise to me because I just couldn't believe that the redfish were that resilient, and that was when I started thinking, man, I got a lot to learn about all of this. How has your fishing changed over since you started in your guide career? What are the biggest things that have changed for you, and why?
Well, I think the most important thing is that out of all the things that have changed, the one thing that hasn't changed is I still learn something frequently on the water. Still pay attention to detail, still listen to everyone that, I can talk to about fishing. I still learn something literally every single day, whether it's self-taught or taught by someone else.
What'd you learn today?
Today I learned that, you basically don't have to rush things. You can take your time, ease into it, pay attention to the variables.
Because you got this hardcore angler that was ready to go at 3:30 in the morning. Now, we had to wait this morning because I did pull my daughter out of school, and she had to take an online test at 8 o'clock. So all the other guides are leaving here at 7.
Mm-hmm.
We sit around waiting until 9:30 almost and leave, and then I don't know, were we the big rod of the day, or
we did win today out of the 5 boats that went out, but
all right, so tell me what else you learned today.
Well, the spot where we fished today, I'm going to confess to you right now, I've never caught fish there before. I just looked at it, and I thought, based on the wind, the water level, and the tide, that would be a good place to fish. I caught fish within several hundred yards of it.
Of course.
I eased in there today, and I just thought, this is what these fish need in these conditions, and it worked out. So
in these conditions, what did those fish need?
They needed shallow structure, close to a little bit deeper water with moving water, and not quite as much wave action as what was experienced up and down the coast from there.
What I was looking at is windbreak. Like, how are you kind of getting out of the wind? And where we were actually catching the fish, you could see just past where there was grass. We were in kind of a little, not a pond, but we were just in the middle of a big bunch of grass. Out there, it almost looked like it was almost about to white cap. In here, it was almost calm.
That's right.
Right. And I just kept looking at that. And when we threw out, we could throw out into the windy area. Never got a bite out there. Get it further in, and the calmer it was, the more bites we got.
Sure.
And
essentially, what we were in was the middle of what once was a solid round island. Mm-hmm. There's a seam in the middle of it now, but the root structure still in that seam, and those fish were drawn to that in particular.
So every day you learn something.
Yeah, I mean, one thing, the footprint of the land here is constantly changing.
Yeah,
we have a lot of subsidence. We've got wind and wave erosion. Even though we have coastal restoration projects, the playing field keeps getting smaller and smaller. But as it gets smaller and smaller, there's places that were once dense vegetation that are now sparse vegetation, and those fish are going to be in that sparse vegetation. They like it. Sometimes it's hard to fish, but occasionally you can find a spot where it just works. You don't hang up too terribly much, and the fish cooperate, and that's the biggest part of it. But the changes that we were talking about a little while ago, I mean, all of our tools have changed. Our equipment's so much better, from the boat to the accessories on the boat to the rods and reels we're using, the line we're using, the hooks we're using.
That's one thing we talked about today, even all the way down to the fillet knives and the electric fillet knives and everything that we're using here. So if you were to, that was going to be one of my next questions. Of all the changes that we've had, what change in gear or technology or whatever, what stands out in your mind as the thing that has made the biggest change in the way that you fish, or how you fish, or your effectiveness, or things that you didn't do before that you're able to do now?
For me, it's got to be the power pole, because it allows me to position my boat where I want it, anytime I want it, keep it there. I can move 5 feet at a time. I can move 50 feet at a time if that's what I desire to do. But it gives me the luxury of anchoring as many times a day as I want, as many spots as I want, and knowing that once I anchor, I'm pretty well secured.
Mm-hmm.
I used to use a 10-foot piece of PVC with a machined aluminum point and wedge it in the mud and tie it off to my cleat and pull it up by hand. Nothing but arm, leg, and back muscle every time I moved. And it didn't do as good a job as what the power pole does, you know? So that has helped me considerably.
I mean, that is really interesting because, with that deal that you just talked about, you stick the, basically a push pole or a stakeout pole in the ground. Now you're like, man, I'd really like to move up there, but I don't want to move that bad. So let's stay here. So in some ways that could be even better because you end up staying there a little bit longer, and now all of a sudden something happens. Certainly seen that plenty of times. But with the power pole, you can almost like a spider, like just pick up and put down, pick up and put down, and you can literally inch yourself into you can make 5 casts. Nope. Pick up. Now you're 10 feet closer, 5 feet closer,
That's
2
right.
feet closer. 5, and then you're able to stop outside of that. That's interesting that's what you pick.
My PVC pole was very effective, but I might stick it in the ground and stick it down there as far as I could possibly reach, and it pull loose. And I'd go right over my fish, or if let's say it held and we were casting and I wanted to go 10 feet closer, well, when I picked it up and I went 10 feet closer, the bottom density might be a little bit looser, and I stick it down and it pulls up, and then what do? So is it always a gamble? What do I do? What do I not do? Whereas with the power pole, you don't even think, you just push it down and it goes in the mud and you're set. You're not going anywhere, especially with the twin power poles. I mean, they have incredible holding power, and that keeps us where we can, basically position our customers 99% of the time where they can cast downwind. They don't have to really cast as hard or as accurately. They just need to throw it in the general direction of where we tell them, and they can have a better day of fishing. They can,
that I think about those days when we're talking about that. There was so much evolution of fishing that happened during those redfish days, the 2002, 3, 4, 5, those years right there. John Oliveira was right in this lodge.
Absolutely.
With a prototype, and everybody's looking at this thing like, what is that thing on the back of the boat? And it wasn't a year later, everybody had them.
Absolutely.
Everybody had them.
Caught on like wildfire. First year was tough, trying to get people who were not tournament fishermen interested in it, but the tournament fishermen instantly realized the benefit. But slowly but surely, the guides and the recreational fishermen started to see the benefit. Now, I'd be willing to bet that 60% of the boats that roll off of showroom floors are equipped with power poles.
I think so, and even double power poles. That was an interesting thing for their businesses, is that it really took off in the. Hi, Hannah. We have a camera right there. That's fine. Come on and get warm. Come sit down and get warm. What was interesting is how the bass fishing tournaments help power pole, because the bass fishermen right away, they put 2 of them on there.
Yes.
Like if one's good, 2's better. How come we didn't think about that? Like we were using them for years before the bass fishermen started to use them, and then immediately they put 2 on. And it's like, well, we need 2 and 2 bigger ones.
Exactly.
And then now almost every boat I see has them. It's really incredible because of like with the way that you put the power pole down and you get blown, right? And we were able to put the power pole down and then use the trolling motor and kind of try to stay in the same place, but it's loud and all this. And then when we put 2 on there, it's like you're just barely getting blown.
Sure.
And you're staying in the same attitude as well as, in the same area, but you keep the boat in the same attitude, that was incredible. What do you think the second, if you were to pick 2 or 3 things. The power pole. What else?
GPS guided trolling motor.
GPS guided trolling motor. How do you use that? Like what will you do in your fishing? How will you use that?
When I'm fishing areas that I can't anchor with my power poles, I'm using the trolling motor to hold me in place. And it's like having a deckhand on board. People think, wow, that's an expensive trolling motor, but how much would it cost me to have a deckhand on my boat every single day to help me maintain boat position when I'm helping clients, rig lines and unhook fish and everything that I do. So I've got more boat control in deep water, having that GPS guided trolling motor, and the remote control key fob is clutch, because I'm all over the boat and I still have control of that trolling motor. My customers are up front fishing, I'm in the back doing my job, everybody's happy. So that in itself has got to be the second best thing. And the only reason it's not first is because that's spot lock on that trolling motor is not very effective in shallow water, because it's going to turn up the bottom. Whereas I put the power poles down, I'm quiet, I'm stealthy, and I'm able to pursue the fish that I'm targeting.
That's what we found with the bay boat is, and learning from coming up here mostly, is that we had bay boats, and there were boats that were similar to bay boats in the Keys, but they were ineffective and nobody wanted them because they couldn't control where they went. So you didn't have a bay boat without a trolling motor and without a power pole. It's not that effective of a boat, like compared to a poling skiff. Because now we can move this poling skiff wherever we want to go. But now when you can do that with the bay boat, it's one thing to move it wherever you want to go, but then to be able to stop it, that's the deadly combination that really changed everything for how we fished a bay boat. All right, third thing.
In terms of the boat itself, the electronics that we use, having the ability to store all of our fishing spots. And think about it, back in the day, I had a flasher on my boat. Now I've got this high resolution 12-inch GPS where I can see so much information at a glance and, navigate from A to B in the shortest possible distance, know that I'm navigating in safe waters because I study the water when the water's low. I mark all the hazards that I can mark, and I travel safe trails. And it's just a huge tool that makes a difference.
Plus, what we saw today is you got fog, and you use radar up here probably as much as anybody in any bay boat uses radar. Crossing the Mississippi River has to be one of the most dangerous things to do on a clear day. Add to that, we were talking about it today. You said, see that little boat right there? It was towing 1,000 feet of dredge line yesterday in the fog.
It was.
That's scary, man.
Very much so, because that stuff's really hard to see in the daylight, much less in the fog.
And so you're using radar certain times of the year, every single day?
Yes, our fog season generally begins around Halloween, and it winds down right after Easter.
It's thick.
It is thick.
That's thick. One of the things that when I'm thinking, those are your 3 things: the GPS, the trolling motor, the power pole. I was kind of thinking to myself, I wonder what mine would be, because I asked this to a lot of people. That's kind of a question that I ask a lot on the podcast. But one of the things that I think is doesn't even have anything to do with what we do on the water, and that is, the way that you can scout, e-scouting, like off the water.
Yeah.
Google Earth, charts, aerial photos. Even forums where people are talking and giving information out willingly, and you don't even have to participate in the conversation. You can just read it, right? And I remember when we were first starting to have an aerial photo. I saw it today. It was where was it?
There on the wall.
It's right back there on the wall.
Yes.
That was that aerial photo map.
No doubt.
And it was like taken on a clear day, and it was beautiful. And we used to just covet that thing, like, oh my God, and write on it and draw on it and everything. I had 2. I had that one and another one that I wrote all over. But just the ability to have that on your phone or on your electronics or Google Earth at night and be like, I think I'm going to go to this area. And I'm going to try this. And what are the things that how has it changed from Google Earth to today? And how has it changed from this chart that I'm looking at to what I'm seeing on Google Earth? And are there things that I need to watch out for? The thing,
Sure.
that looks like this is where I caught fish before, and now all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I see why I was catching fish there before. It's not what I thought. It's this. There's obvious current coming through there, and you can see that it's deeper than the other areas around there.
That's
and
right.
I just find that is a game changer of monumental proportions.
Oh, yeah. That's what makes you a great angler. You study the how and the why.
Well,
and
you try to.
right. And
Sometimes you never know.
Exactly. But on my GPS, I run a dated map because I want to see where the land used to be here.
You do that on purpose.
I do it on purpose. But I go home and study Google Earth because I want to see what's around the corner from where I was today and know if I can get there or not.
Interesting. So just on a personal note, we're about out of time and we're about out of light. So some of the questions that I've been asking people also is, if you have, do you have non-negotiables on a daily basis? When you wake up in the morning, do you have things that are non-negotiable to you that you're going to get done no matter what happens on that day? Does anything come to mind?
In terms of
anything?
Well, I mean, I'm going to, absolutely give 100% every day to every customer. It's non-negotiable. I'm going to work as hard as I can for every customer and make sure they're great. And, back home, I'm going to do my best job, be a great husband, great dad.
You're a good dude, man. I've always enjoyed our time together, and you're a good dude. You're a good dad. I was glad to meet your boys today, and I say meet your boys. I met your boys a long time ago, but when you haven't seen somebody in 15 years, they're two men.
Without a doubt.
They're two men, and I remember two boys. Yeah, so that's very cool.
I was glad to fish with your daughter. I've seen pictures of her and never do recall seeing her in person. I know I've seen your two boys, and that's kind of connecting the dots, putting the puzzle together.
Yeah, the funny thing is when we were out this morning talking to Billy, and I went in last night and I was looking at all the trophies, and I'm looking and I'm like, 2005, man, that seems like a long time ago. Like
really
thinking about the things that were going on then with my family in 2005. I had two little boys, two in diapers basically, and now they're both grown. Hannah wasn't even 2002. She was really, really a baby, and in other ways, it seems like it was like yesterday, and it also seems like it was a whole lifetime ago. Do you? I mean, I guess we all feel like that in certain ways about your life, but it's just such a weird time because that was such an intense period in our lives of fishing those tournaments and being in that super competitive thing, and then you had all the hurricanes and you had all this. That was like it had to be like a in all of our lives and everything. That was like a majorly intense period.
Absolutely. I guess the twist on it for me is I want to forget Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah,
I remember all those tournaments and all that good stuff that went along with it, but in the back of my mind, I try to forget Hurricane Katrina and kind of block that out. So it changes the perspective of time for me, but it is definitely a double-edged sword. It seems like a million years ago, and it seems like yesterday.
Yeah. So what's the future hold for Anthony Randazzo and Paradise Plus?
We're just going to keep doing what we're doing, and they say if it's not broken, don't fix it. So we're just going to keep polishing it and doing what we can to make it slightly better year by year, and working hard and trying to make as many people who come through here leave with a smiling face and want to come back again and tell their friends to come.
Right. Well, you got two more smiling faces with us. What are we going to do tomorrow?
We're going to go back out there in a little bit different area. The wind's going to, blow pretty good tonight. Temperature's going to cool down. Barometer's going to go up. We're going to go look for some bigger fish, see what Hannah can tackle in the bigger realm of red fishing.
She's ready, man. We throw lures. We do what?
We're going to mix it up with a little bit of everything.
Okay. Well, I like a little bit of everything. She needs a little bit of everything too. This is it's a new kind of fishing for her. She hasn't done this before, and the Louisiana fishing is far different than the Florida fishing. I mean, we do a lot of similar types of fishing, but you catch more fish here.
thankfully.
Yeah.
I have to move otherwise.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. If anybody wants to come here, they want to experience this for themselves, what do they do?
They can give us a shout. We've got a website. It's www.paradise-plus.com, and we've got a phone open pretty much all day, every day. It's 504-628-4526.
You can get one of those August days, or
Absolutely.
the December days, or the February days with the sleet.
That's right.
You did a great sales job on that. You're going to have the phone is going to be ringing off the hook for those sleeting February days. I'm sure people are going to be real excited about that. All right, Anthony. Looking forward to fishing tomorrow, and thanks also always for your friendship and being such a good host.
Thank you. You're
All
awesome.
right, my man. See ya.
Take care.
All right, that's it for today. Come back next week for another awesome guest, and we are out. See ya.